Money FM 89.3, the best of Saturday mornings. International News Review.
And here we are with our International News Review, Money FM 89.3. We are going to start with Trump and Putin meeting in Alaska. They have just met. They have said that there was some progress, although details have not really been given on exactly what they discussed or what they progressed on. What do we know at this point, Steve? Still pretty thin, it looks like.
Hey, we know this was a win for Putin, is what we know. This meeting should not have happened. It certainly should not have happened in the United States of America, where you have a war criminal being welcomed at the tarmac by the President of the United States, which goes against all protocol. And you can find very, very few exceptions where that ever happens. And so what happens in the U.S.? The U.S., nothing happens. What does Trump say? Oh, there's no deal until there's a deal, and there's clearly no deal here. They take a joint news conference that is hard to describe as a joint news conference when they won't take any questions from reporters, which shows that things probably went worse than they expected. And yet the Russians back home play this up. We now have two equals. Putin and Trump are equals, and this is only going to benefit Putin back home. It does nothing to end the war. And if you need anything else to show that, while the two of them were meeting, the Russians continue to bomb Ukraine.
The Guardian says, and I'm quoting directly here, Donald Trump left more questions than answers as he fawned. That's a big word for a news organization to use. As he fawned over Vladimir Putin. And just to give some context, this is an actual quote from Donald Trump. Again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir. This is the American president talking to an adversary in geopolitical terms.
Who invaded another sovereign nation.
Illegally invaded a sovereign nation. Simple question. Our listeners are asking it. Why? Why does he fawn over this man?
We look, there's two theories that are out there. I will give three theories. One theory is that Putin has some type of compromat or something on Trump, and that Trump will do anything to keep that from coming out. I don't buy into that, but that's one theory. The second theory is that, look, Trump wants to be a strongman, and everything he's doing in the United States right now in destroying and working to destroy the institutions we have shows that's who he respects, and that's why he shows this type of respect for Putin. He shows this type of respect for other people who are autocrats like Xi Jinping, and so that's the second theory. And that the third theory is that no one has ever shown more desperation to win a Nobel Peace Prize than Donald Trump is doing right now. And he thinks this is his ticket to get that Nobel Peace Prize. And so those are the three theories that are out there, and you can take whichever one you want, but they all get you to the same place, which is, as you reported, Neil, that Trump fawns over Putin.
Coming into this, Steve, there were indicators that there would be some sort of a land swap or, perhaps current positions frozen. There's a lot of talk about what may or may not have been. From the side of Zelensky and the Ukrainians, what is going to look like a win? What is going to look like a loss, coming out of these talks?
Well, again, nothing came out of these talks, and we don't know what happened.
Well, we don't know what came out of the talks.
We don't know, and we may never know what was said because really, it's unfathomable for anybody but Donald Trump. He goes into the car, his limo with Putin alone. No translators, no note takers, no experts. So we don't know what was said between the two of them. And history will never know what has been said between the two of them. And that is dangerous. So we don't know what promises may have been met. We have no clue. Now Trump did say that it's up to Ukraine to decide whether to accept a proposal or not. But Donald Trump can put, not just the fingers on the scale, his entire hand on the scale, either on to force Putin to come to the table or to force Zelensky to come to the table. And we have no clue right now where we're going to go from here.
Yeah. Well, Putin said half jokingly, next time we'll meet in Moscow. I just can't see what universe that happens. But are we any closer to the three of them getting together after this meeting? Putin, Trump, Zelensky. Are we any closer?
No, we're not closer. And again, but we need to know, look, Trump's come up with all of these deadlines that Putin just completely ignores. Now, if Trump decides after this meeting, and I don't think he will, there's no indication that he will, that he'll actually put heavy sanctions on the Russians and to force them to come to some type of agreement that isn't what this land, that they get the land that they've invaded. And you had the U.S., I believe he's the U.S. ambassador to the EU, Whitaker, who I met last summer or 2 summers ago. He said, well, the Russians won't get anything that they didn't, quote unquote, earn. To have an American government official say the Russians are entitled to what they earned is really difficult.
Well, it's a story in development, no doubt about it. All right, let's bring it closer to home. Ong Beng Seng pleaded guilty and was fined $23,000 for his role in the Singapore gift scandal. This, of course, he admitted to abetting the obstruction of justice by helping our former transport minister, Mr. Iswaran, cover up evidence while the latter was being investigated for corruption. This has caused a lot of debate in Singapore. What do you make of it?
This is one where I'm going to give a lot of deference to the judge in the case, because the judge is the one who knows the facts. The judge is the one who knows the laws. And Neil, you can look at it just as you laid out, which of course is 100% accurate, and say that this is something that really damaged Singapore. Singapore's reputation is that this is the place in Asia that you can come and do business with full transparency, and that there's no corruption, and that you have to make sure that this advantage that Singapore has almost over most countries in the region, that it keeps it. But at the same time, you have to say, what is the law? You have to say, what is the position of the defendant, the criminal in this case? And she looked at his age. She looked at the fact that he has incurable malignant cancer, and came out with the sentence that she came out with, which is the maximum fine that she was allowed to give under the law, and that she showed that he took his medical condition into account. And obviously, none of us were in the courtroom. None of us had the evidence. I personally go along with the judge and say I would agree with it, whatever she decides.
I mean, I know you're in a law background yourself. The judge said judicial mercy, in quotes, judicial mercy would be granted in light of his poor health. As you mentioned there, I think he has a form of cancer. It's a very serious form of cancer. But just to play devil's advocate, there's a lot of talk online, legal and otherwise, saying, well, in that case, if anybody's sick, will they feel the full force of the law? Can that always be not an excuse, but a reason not to imprison someone?
I mean, if you're 80 years old and you have multiple myeloma and you're immunosuppressed, do you normally commit crime? I don't think we should be worried about people who are near 80 and what people who may be on their deathbed. Is this going to give them a license to do things?
But you don't generally imprison people. You don't generally imprison people just because it'll stop them committing further crimes. You imprison them because it's a punishment for their previous crime.
Yes, but yes, but there's also a deterrent element into why what type of sentence you give somebody. How hard a sentence this is, what type of message does it send, and I personally don't believe that this is going to have somebody say, well, you know what, I wasn't going to commit this crime, but now that I know that, even a person who's sick, but now that I know that I won't have to go to jail, possibly, then I'm more likely to commit it. I don't buy it. I just don't think that the human being thinks that way.
All right, moving on.
Yes.
Chinese brands are everywhere in Singapore right now. You can't move anywhere without seeing the Pop Mart shops or the BYD showrooms. Just yesterday, I was walking down Alexandra Road and a former car dealer had shut down and moved on elsewhere. I looked through the window and what was under wraps? dozens of brand new BYDs, opening another outlet somewhere in the Alexandria area. So there's this great feature come out this week in Al Jazeera saying that Singapore is really warming to made in China brands like
really,
never before.
It's really quite shocking, and of course we've seen Labubu, right? We talked about Labubu a long time ago on the low end of the spectrum, and electric EVs on the high end of the spectrum. But it is very notable now that not only is the quality coming up, especially on these higher end products, but people are really getting into them, aren't they, Steve?
Well, there's two things that really jumped out at me, and in the United States, there's Columbus, Ohio, is like the most demographically American city in the country, with the mix of black people and white people and Hispanic people and wealth and all of that. So every brand goes to Columbus to try something out. McDonald's will try out a new sandwich there, right? You'll try out a new brand. And I learned from this article, Singapore is basically the Columbus of Asia.
Yep.
I never thought that way.
That's interesting, isn't it?
And the reason, I should say the Columbus of Asia for China in particular, because here you have a place that's 3/4 of the population is ethnic Chinese, but they are international, right? Global in taste.
They've got money.
Well, they got money. And so if you want to go global from China, test it in Singapore. And if it works in Singapore, it's likely to work elsewhere. And if it doesn't work in Singapore, well, then you got to go retool it. So Singapore is the Columbus, Ohio for China, which I had never thought of. And then the second thing that I learned in this article, and Glenn, thanks so much. I never would have seen this for finding this article and sharing it, is that there's now a new phrase I never heard. Born again Chinese, BAC. I always knew what ABC, right? American born Chinese. That was always a concept I knew. But BAC is a new thing that I've just learned anyway. Born again Chinese. It's people of Chinese descent outside of China, especially in Singapore and Malaysia, who embrace a strong pro-China identity, even though they may have cultural or limited linguistic ties. And so you combine that Columbus, Ohio, and the BAC together, and Neil, no surprise, you're seeing Chinese brands everywhere in Singapore now.
I think it's more than that. I think Singaporeans are much more cynical. They just go with their pocket. The BYD is a better car. Because previously there was this perception made in China inferred inferiority, a cheap knockoff, whether it's manufactured or otherwise. Made in China has lost that connotation, Steve. And that's quite a profound change for American manufacturers, Japanese, and so on. Made in China does not mean inferior anymore.
Well, we saw this in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Made in Japan.
Yeah,
that's where when I was growing up, all the cheap plastic toys that we had were made in Japan and stamped on the bottom, right? And then in the 80s, you had Sony, and you had all these brands rise from on the Japanese scale. And then at that time, it was Korean stuff was cheap. So the Korean cars were cheap. The Hyundais, you wouldn't think twice about buying one. But then they moved up the scale, and now it's China's turn to do that as well.
And boy, do just some of the marketing people just drive me crazy with their language. And this is one that I read in this story as well, where this professor at the marketing department at NUS said that the stigma of made in China is gone, and that he said these brands are now perceived as cool, modern, and emotionally in tune with what young consumers want. It makes people feel local and global at the same time. And then he says, you can walk into a Chagi. I have no idea what that is. You can walk into a Chagi.
It's a coffee and tea shop.
Okay. I'll take your word for it.
You need to get out of Orchard Road.
I'll take your word for it.
They have a bunch of them now.
They have a bunch on Orchard Road from what the website says.
I think it's Chagi. But
okay, whatever. Yeah. You can walk into one of these places and feel like you are part of a new kind of aesthetic culture. Clean design, soft lighting, calming music. It is not selling a product. It is selling a feeling.
Well, there you go. And I don't want to make everything about Trump, but this is really pushing at an open door for China, isn't it? In soft power terms, we talked about it with the charitable donations, with refugees.
Or with David Black from Black Marketing.
Exactly. You've seen a turn away from the US, away from the West. This is just an open door for China.
It's a combination of both of those things. And as you said, Chinese products used to be seen as cheap or as knockoffs, and they're not anymore. I mean, they're not anymore. And there's reasons why BYD is such a successful product and why it's so well engineered because of all the state subsidies.
Yeah, state subsidized,
the Chinese
control their supply chains. It's still a well-made product,
absolutely.
and the average Singaporean won't care.
Well, absolutely. And that is why you see that combination of China becoming much at manufacturing, much better at design, and the damage that Donald Trump is doing to brand America, and the BAC culture here and in Malaysia, and now you get Chinese brands just really, crushing it here in Singapore.
Born again Chinese, huh? You got your Xiaomi's, you got Luckin Coffee is great coffee, actually, and they're giving Starbucks a run for the money.
Yep.
Shaggy as well, as you mentioned.
Now we're getting into sacrilege going after Starbucks.
And Pop Mart.
Well, they're done. I mean, Luckin has crushed them in China, right?
But to Steve's point about the cultural impact, Pop Mart is a phenomenon. I was there last week. I don't know why. I mean, kids will tell me, but for SG60, I happened to go past 2 or 3 different Pop Mart stores. I was visiting bookstores, queuing around the block.
Yep.
There was some new release for SG60, and it was a blind buy. So they didn't even know what was in the box, and they were queuing around the block.
It's crazy.
Max knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They were queuing around the block for a blind buy object. They didn't even know what they were buying.
Max, Chinese brands, Gen Z, go.
They're very profitable.
There you go.
And they're for some reason, they're just.
So why are they so trendy, Max? What with your generation?
I guess it's like once someone has that one thing, everyone else wants that one thing.
Yeah, the FOMO kicks in.
And it can be spread by social media, and in which I've been affected by it. Like, I've seen it a lot.
And Liaoning, like the shoes and stuff, the sports stuff for Liaoning, right? The brand. It's like a big brand, but also all these other brands, right?
Yeah, especially Labubu.
Yeah, Labubu. Okay. Thanks, Max. Max does not have any Labubu, by the way.
Okay. I wouldn't hold it against him if he did.
His allowance does not allow him that level of spending. $100 on something he wouldn't be interested in it anyway. But
right,
anyway,
Steve, let's finish it off. Sylvester Stallone, I'm torn. I'm upset. Explain why.
Well, Donald Trump is taking over the world in the United States for sure, and he's taken over the Kennedy Center, and so he is now handpicking who gets the Kennedy Center honors. And he said, no more wokeness. We're going, for the no wokesters. We're going real Americans. And so Sylvester Stallone is on that list. Kiss is on that list, and so it's going to be a very different type of Kennedy Center honors. Although, to be honest, I think KISS is much more mainstream, and I could make a strong argument that Sylvester Stallone has really influenced the American culture.
No, he should. He should. So I think they could.
I think they could both be in there. And so you know what? Again, we always hammered Donald Trump on this show. I'm going to say 100% with the president on Rocky/Rambo getting into the getting a Kennedy Center honor, and certainly KISS. You cannot argue against KISS when you're telling me that the previous bands who've gotten these honors are Zeppelin and the Eagles and U2. Why not KISS?
And I'd just like to say, occasionally, those Republicans who like to give Steve a hard time, there's your headline. Steve Okun 100% agrees with Donald Trump. You heard it here first.
Stallone on Stallone. Look, Rocky is one of my lifetime.
That has to be your headline on LinkedIn tomorrow.
Rocky top is not in your top 5.
Top
5.
Easily
top 5. Yeah, I mean the two Godfathers you combine.
Thank you, gentlemen.
For sure, Rocky.
Always a pleasure. See you next week.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.